I just got the harmony and trust abounding.
The peace, love, and
Yeah, well,
happy.
that was the dawning of the
Well, I
age
think
of
that's the cool
Aquarius.
thing is that, the 60s were influential in so many ways. That's what we were talking this earlier, is that there were energies in the 60s that made change in social dynamics that had never occurred before, and that have mostly stuck, or at least they're certainly not the same as they were in the 50s or before.
But why was that so short? Because when I'm thinking of the beautiful times, the times when you walk down the street and people were smoking on the corner and giving you a hit and saying, come back and listen to my new album, and you didn't know them, but you went, and
You
it
went
was,
anyway, right?
yeah,
Right.
and it was wonderful. That was an awfully short
How
period.
short was it?
For me, it was probably 15 years.
Oh, it wasn't that long for me.
15.
I think it
so-
started, well, right, when did it start?
Well, for me, it started because I remember listening to Ola Tunji in
Oh,
my
okay.
basement.
Oh.
Yes, because that's where I had to listen to him with candles and incense.
I did a show with Olatunji.
You know, we've had a conversation about that.
Really? Yeah.
But that was probably 64, maybe? Or...
Could have been. Drums Passion came out in 64.
Okay.
63, 64.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm thinking then. And I used to play guitar, and Mary Travers and Peter, Paul, and Mary, I'd play those songs over and over again, those 3 chords.
Okay, so it started, well, you weren't smoking pot in 64 yet, I assume.
No, I wasn't, because I was in St. Louis, Missouri.
Nobody was, right.
Maybe somebody was selling it in St. Louis,
Who
but
knows, right. Okay.
it didn't
So
get
when
to
did
my
it-
neighborhood.
When did it end?
Okay, so we established 64 then as a general.
Okay.
So if I say 15 years, it would have had to have ended in the 80s.
Well, 15 from 64 would be 79, right?
Yeah, the 80s. So
For me,
I think there was peace, love, and
all the way through the 70s? Oh my gosh, I wish I could agree. No, well, I think the real...
yes, because the music had a different way of going at it, but it was still freedom and change and.
The 60s were brief for me because they were amazing, obviously now in retrospect, amazingly innocent. That is to say, this is the big sort of retrospective, if you want. If you're looking at it from the 60s point, then looking back from now is a disappointment because the depth and breadth of that time is not here today at all, right? And you're saying, why did it go away? Why did the interest of keeping chemicals out of our food and life, how come people didn't continue to go that way? And
so it's talking about mankind, your human nature versus spiritualism. And it's all about in the beginning of time when people looked up and they saw the stars, they saw paths, and there was a thing about pathways. And how religions came about is you had to get on a certain path and that would keep you whatever. I think we have lost that path. I think there was a crossroads and we got off a decent path.
why?
And
how or why? When?
I honestly think it was in the 60s. I think it was in that time. Maybe in the middle of it, I don't know. Maybe somebody or something happened that said, okay, are we going to be good? Because we went in the other direction, clearly in the other direction.
You mean in the 70s or?
Yeah, and we're in the late 70s. I say by the 80s, by that.
We'd lost all.
We were gone. We were gone. By Costco and Walmarts and things like that, we were down that path. And how you can't get off of it. According to my edX class, you have to back up. And
how do you back up?
I don't know. Or you bleed out the sides, or you start a new path. But how are you going? A path is like
I don't see how we're going
like
to go
a groove
back.
from a wheelbarrow, to use the Berenstein
Right.
Bears.
It's a rut.
Do you remember the Berenstain Bears' Bad Habits?
Didn't happen to see that book, but okay.
It was a wheelbarrow that kept doing this groove, and we've been doing it for too long. Since the 80s, we have been so corrupt. Not a hint of you giving me a flower or me going home in a car with a stranger.
No, there's no gentility.
Not a hint. So.
And why is that?
I think it was rape and greed.
Well, you're not going to go back from that.
You mean?
How can you return? How can you
How
restore
can you go
that?
back that
yeah,
path?
You can't. How can you back up from that?
Well,
you can't back up that because it's occurred, and not only has it occurred, but in fact, to me, the crime that makes
I know how you can go back from it.
Okay.
I mean, you can have such devastation that.
Oh, that's pretty nasty.
Yeah, it is. No, I mean, I'm just talking off the top of my head. This isn't like
That's how, in fact, I would have to assume that's probably the only way that you can clean it up is to kill everybody.
Yeah.
Sounds possibly
I know someone
biblical.
who's starting a company with jackfruit to feed the world. And we were all saying, oh my God, she's the COO and there's 3 of them and she's going to this thing and she's trying to, grow her company of selling jackfruit. She says, because there's so many people who are so hungry.
Right.
Well, if you destroy enough people,
if you destroy enough people, you won't have to feed them all.
And your company will go south. So, I mean,
I can't face that. To me, I can't assume that.
You can't assume that because it's happened on a regular basis throughout history. So why wouldn't it be coming?
I don't think. Yes, it very much likely can be coming. And in fact, if you just open up a little, I think the opportunity is better than ever. But from a humanistic point of view, you don't want to will that. You want to.
But don't you think there'll be a much more dynamic event that will affect the population before global warming really takes effect? Do you honestly think that there's not going to be a human?
No, I think global warming is coming soon enough. And in fact, it would be reasonable to say that global warming is one of the triggers that precipitates something more calamitous.
Mm-hmm.
When you have, yesterday, day before, read that you could have as much as 3 feet in sea rise in the next 15 years. Well, that's really, really soon, and 6-8 inches makes a difference in certain places.
It is, and all that will mean is that we'll
have less for more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the theme commonly is not just through global warming, but all kind of commodity resources, all kinds of things. Water are not only is there more demand because there are more people of it. California and Arizona are a pretty good example of water, right? We took the water because we needed it, but there are more and more people, and they need more and more water, and so they still want it. What, are you going to take the water away from them?
No, I think you should take the water away from them. I think this is absolutely crazy. This is what I'm saying about getting on the wrong path.
What will happen when you take the water from them?
But I'm not saying that we really should do that. But
then what should we do?
This is what happened with this path that we're on.
Right.
At some point, you got on the path that said, we want to live here, and the only way that we can do it is we can borrow from the future, and we can just take all this water.
This path was set out 500 years ago, at least.
And now...
So what are you going to do?
You're going to have to get off of that path. You're going to have to move to where there's water.
Well, like you just said, the only
You're
way
going to have to move to where there's water. There's no water there. I sound like Donald Trump. I just heard myself.
Don't have water? You go get water. No, he would buy water. Good people to bring it in.
Maybe anti-Donald Trump, but you can't keep, making things worse to fix the problem.
Of course. Let me go back to the comparison of the 60s. It's not so much even a comparison. It's the curve of life, or the curve of how things are affected. Back in the 60s, for whether it be 3 or 4 years or 15 years, we were far more generous, and we lost that before we. So is it generosity is the common denominator that makes it, or is it goodwill, or is that the same thing? Was there more goodwill back then?
I don't even know if it's goodwill or if it's even generosity. It's what is true. And what is true is doing good things and doing the smart thing and the wise thing.
So those aren't done now.
Well, they aren't done. I mean, if you're taking, 5 million cattle and feeding them, horrible food and marching them to be slaughtered, half dead, and using that to feed people, that was a bad decision that was made to feed people.
So my theme here is to see how we can save ourselves, because that's what we thought we could 50 years ago, and I think the theme, or the sort
We
of
did.
right, that
Oh,
was
gosh.
no, but that's what I'm saying. That's
Do
that's
you see
condensing
how
it.
happy all of a sudden it makes you feel?
Yeah, it was. We can save ourselves. We have all these methods, the domes, the organic farming,
Well,
the
don't
music,
you think you've saved yourself
the
personally?
hey dude, have a hit, man. All those different things were a form of society that had great hope.
And that were so good.
Now, 50 years later, it's really elusive to find the hope that we thought we had back then. And I'm not completely convinced that it's unattainable, number one.
Oh, I am.
I haven't given up. And I think that obviously you're probably right. Not everybody will be able to take advantage, but for it to be a wholesale catastrophe in order to enable the future, that's called an apocalyptical kind of transformation.
Yeah.
And it's very
I
dark
know.
and possibly biblical. Yeah, I think if you look at the catastrophic as the gateway to peace and love, there are some pretty harsh mythical events that prescribe that as well. But I guess the sentiment from the 60s would like us to take what we have and so are you saying that we're facing
Yeah, no.
the
I mean, how could that happen? How, honestly? I mean, I think we all who have some sense have to build their own good, healthy, happy, loving life. I really like my life. I like how I eat. I like how I interact with my friends. I feel peace. I feel love. And I try not to do harm. But I feel all the harm raging. And you don't see me walking away, putting on, my hair cloak or whatever it is, and walking out and going out and trying to save them, because I think you'd just be shot in the head. So I don't have any faith. I think it's too well established. I think it's too effective. I think it gets more and more effective. I think 1% owns all the wealth. It's something like that. We used to say 5% owned.
right.
But now we're saying 1% and 2%, and that's just got too much of a hold on you.
And you think all the kind of personal empowerment that's happened over the last, it's not just the 60s, because in the 60s we learned to protest and make change in college campuses.
Yeah.
But not just. I think we learned to make change in government awareness, that is to at least know what some things, it's not just C-SPAN, but the sort of laws that allow us to freedom of information. There are a whole range of positive change that you don't think that any of those things are...
But do you see that on the news, or do you see people just shooting other people in the head? Because I don't see I don't turn on the news in the morning, which is what I used to do. Now I turn on Charlie Rose or Nova and Hope, because I used to get up religiously and turn on the TV and listen to the news. And we don't have any control over it. That's your mass, that's the mass news that everybody's listening to every morning. And it's a different day for me to start off my day, with some story of little birds, building a nest versus watching, all the crazy killings and, families, grandmother, mother, and child, nobody over the age of 40 found in a hovel, a filthy hovel. They take the child away. The news is horrible. And that's how everybody wakes up. I bet everybody does. I bet everybody wakes up and turns on their TV and watches the news.
Were you hopeful in 1966?
Yes, I didn't even know not to be hopeful. It wasn't like, it was like not knowing about death. It's like I remember, when I hit 60 and figured out I was going to die, that was like, it was the same thing with like the 60s. I didn't know there wasn't an unhopeful thing. I thought I expected all these changes to take place.
Yeah.
I expected there to be, equality among all people. I expected there to be innocence, and I expected to be safe walking down the street, and I didn't expect to necessarily be able to get stoned on every street corner, but I expected that would, great freedoms would come about. And it was just like finding out at 50 or 60 that I was really going to die. It was like,
wow, what the
I didn't even give it a thought that it wasn't going to happen. That's how good it was. That's how beautiful it was. You didn't even think about that.
I think, especially for me, the energy then, maybe it started in the mid-60s, but it certainly accumulated during the time that we were in London, and it wasn't just for London. I could see it in New York or hear it on the phone in California, or where there was a huge amount of positive support for everything that was involved. Accommodation, there was a sense of collaboration, or even if it wasn't your thing, whatever it was really, really cool, and oh, that's cool, let's go do that, and what do you need, man? And there was a sense of participation and encouragement and what's the word I'm really looking for? A kind of enthusiasm for something, for a new discovery that somebody else would do. Oh, you're doing that? Wow, this is really cool. Oh, wow, can we take a... And you could sort of take these little excursions into other people's projects. And the incredible power of the 60s was this wish for everybody to do what, to just be positive and contribute something that would really make a change. The make a change was infused in everybody's sort of sensibility back then, and people, if they weren't going to do it themselves, they were positive about supporting other people.
No, I see that, and I saw that in your work as well. And I see what you're saying, and I understand that the bloom was off in the 70s.
Sure.
But I do think I think then there was like a middle-agedness. It didn't die in the 70s or in 69 and 70. It didn't die at Altamont. It just kind of lost as a movement and an era.
It lost its vitality.
Its innocence.
Its innocence and its vitality.
Okay. So are you then saying, because I can accept it both ways, I can say that, because I said the era probably was all gone by the 80s, but it was dying, it was aging.
Throughout the entire 70s.
And that aging is the antithesis of what we said the 60s were about.
Right.
So is that...
Right. It decayed away.
Yeah. And should that decay be counted even? Because the purity...
For me, yeah, absolutely.
Purity.
Absolutely, yeah. Talk about 60s music. What did you see back then that you liked? Did you ever see any of our shows? No, you never went to the Roundhouse.
Yes, I did. I
Did
went
you?
a couple of times.
What'd you see?
Are you kidding? I
What'd
can't. No, I can't remember. But yeah, and I told you about
Eric Clapton.
the time when you woke me up.
That didn't happen.
That's
I think of
so
all the
crazy.
time, you know, we rarely brought anybody from a gig back. I think the only time I remember really it was
Well, who else would have brought people back and gone up and woken us up, and brought us down, all proud? Here's such and such sitting in the living room.
Brian. Brian was much
Brian
more.
could have.
Brian was much more mixing it up.
Yeah,
and
well, I
that's
used to go
Brian's
to
life.
a lot of
I
folk
didn't
shows
mix it
with
up
Brian.
at all. Yeah.
I used to see. He loved. It wasn't Jon Stewart. Yes, Jon Stewart.
Well, Brian's favorite act was John and Beverly Martin.
That's it. John and Beverly Martin. That's who we used to go see. In fact, Brian would
was a
get
close
to
friend of
play
that. Yeah.
every so often with John and Beverly Martin.
They split up evidently.
Yeah.
They were a little too soft for me, but he had a good relationship with them.
Yeah. Well, Richard and Linda Thompson.
Right. Fairport was for me.
And who was, when I lived on the Bayswater Road, Cat Stevens. Cat Stevens would play around. No, there was fabulous music back then.
No, the music was great. I didn't bring anybody home, but what we had at the Roundhouse and elsewhere was exceptional.
Yeah. Mott the Hoople today.
Mott the Hoople. No, I must have been. There must be a list of 100 bands that played there over the different time from Liverpool.
So do you think you supported over 100 bands?
Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. We had them twice.
Oh, I love
It's
them.
a Beautiful Day.
Wow.
John Lee Hooker.
Something
lots of
happened
American.
to me yesterday.
Who's that?
Bonzo Dog Doodah.
Oh yeah. Well, for me, Urban Spaceman and Mr.
Mighty
Apollo.
groovy. Oh my God, they were
Vivian
fabulous.
Stanchel. Oh, he was a great
Yes, Vivian
No, I like
Stanchel on
him.
the xylophone or something.
Yeah.
You're so little puppy. Here's the puppy.
Hey, Brood. Oh, he just loves having Carla.
Yes.
It was just awesome. Not the generosity, the kindness, the access, the sharing, the.
And look how all of that could have gone. We could have created a heaven.
It was too special.
A heaven on earth.
One would think. It was for me, and I never saw anything. I mean, when we came back here, we generated some of that for a year or two.
But see, isn't that what your religion is? I know that's what my religion is. My religion is heaven is where you are. Who is that? Not Pentangle.
No, that's
who
traffic.
Traffic, yeah. Heaven is where you are. And so the fact that you had that moment, and the fact that we now have completely different moments, heaven really is where you are. There isn't heaven above you. You're not going to die and go to heaven. Heaven is where you are. So that's why I'm saying, why have we created, instead of creating heaven, why did we create? It's not hell, but it's pretty.
It could be a lot better.
Yeah.
Sure.
Could be a lot better.
Well, I think we're almost done, at least for this trust, and then I can make it so you can watch it. But I think we did that, because we didn't know any better. But I also think the larger motive was it wasn't working. It wasn't. There wasn't enough heaven to go around.
Oh. Well, I won't argue it here. We'll argue it on our next one.
Level, yeah.
But because I think there could have been, and there still can be enough heaven to go around. It's too corrupted.
Well, I think it's a matter of style, exactly. In other words, there could be enough heaven to go around if we decided to play by that, but
to get small and beautiful again.
Yeah. But I don't think
so. Maybe that's it. Get small and beautiful.
One pill makes you larger.
All right.